This happened about 3 years ago while I was driving from Pennsylvania down to Georgia to visit an old friend from college. I've always enjoyed long drives by myself. There's something relaxing about being alone on the road with music playing and miles disappearing behind you. I left before sunrise thinking I could finish the trip in one day, but by the time midnight rolled around, I was completely exhausted. I had been driving for nearly 14 hours. Around 12:30 in the morning, somewhere in rural North Carolina, I decided enough was enough. I needed sleep before I ended up drifting into another lane. I took the next exit I saw. The exit only had a truck stop, a closed diner, and 2 small roadside motels. Neither looked particularly inviting, but I wasn't exactly shopping for luxury accommodations. I picked the cheaper one. The motel looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The faded sign buzzed inconsistently, several exterior lights were burned out, and there were only a handful of vehicles scattered around the parking lot. The whole place gave off a strange feeling. I almost turned around and left. Unfortunately, I was too tired to care. Inside the office, a tired-looking clerk sat behind a scratched plexiglass window. He handed me a physical key attached to a giant plastic tag and barely said a word. He told me my room was upstairs. As I carried my bag across the parking lot, I noticed how quiet everything was. No traffic. No conversations. Nothing. Just the hum of a few fluorescent lights. The room itself wasn't terrible, just old. The carpet smelled damp. The air conditioner rattled loudly whenever it turned on. The bathroom light flickered occasionally. Still, it was a bed. That was all I needed. I locked the door, closed the curtains, took a quick shower, and climbed into bed. For about 15 minutes everything was peaceful. Then I started hearing voices through the wall beside me. At first I assumed it was a couple arguing. The deeper voice sounded angry. The higher voice sounded nervous. I rolled my eyes and turned the television volume up slightly. Unfortunately, the argument continued. Back and forth. Back and forth. The strange thing was how perfectly timed it sounded. Nobody interrupted each other. Nobody talked over one another. Each voice waited patiently for the other to finish. Eventually curiosity got the better of me. I muted the television and listened more carefully. That's when something clicked. The 2 voices sounded almost identical. One was simply pitched higher. I sat up immediately. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop hearing it. There wasn't a couple next door. There was only one person. A single man carrying on a full conversation with himself. He would switch from a deep voice to a higher one and then answer himself as if 2 people were present. The realization sent a chill through me. It wasn't normal. It wasn't funny. It was disturbing. The conversation continued for several more minutes before suddenly stopping. Silence filled the room. I remember staring at the ceiling, hoping whoever was next door had finally gone to sleep. Then came 3 slow knocks against the wall beside my bed. Knock. 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 My entire body froze. A muffled voice came through the wall. I know you're awake. The voice sounded playful. Almost amused. I didn't respond. A few seconds later came 3 more knocks. Then the exact same sentence. I know you're awake. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV louder. For a moment everything went quiet. Then I heard a door open outside. My stomach dropped. I knew immediately it had to be the man from next door. The footsteps moved along the balcony. Closer. Closer. Until they stopped outside my room. The curtains were fully closed except for a tiny gap near one edge. I stared at that gap for several seconds. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part desperately wanted to know if someone was standing outside. Curiosity won. I slowly approached the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see outside. The instant I looked through the gap, I nearly jumped out of my skin. A man was standing inches from the glass. He was trying to look inside. His face was so close to the window that we made eye contact immediately. I stumbled backward. The moment he realized I'd seen him, he began speaking. Except he wasn't speaking normally. He was changing voices. 1 second he sounded like a child. The next second he sounded much older. Then he switched to a strange accent. Then another. He kept cycling through different voices while pacing outside my room. At first it sounded ridiculous. Then it became terrifying. He eventually started knocking on my door. Each knock grew harder. Not enough to break it down. Just enough to let me know he wasn't leaving. I called the front desk immediately. The clerk sounded annoyed at first. Then he heard the knocking through the phone. His attitude changed instantly. He said he'd come up right away. The knocking continued for another minute. Then suddenly stopped. I looked through the peephole and watched the man quickly disappear into the room beside mine. Moments later the clerk arrived carrying a flashlight. He walked over and knocked on the neighboring door several times. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Eventually he came over to my room and asked what happened. After I explained everything, he sighed heavily. Apparently the man had been staying there for weeks. That answer alone convinced me I didn't want to remain anywhere near him. I asked if there was another room available. Thankfully there was. The clerk moved me downstairs near the office. I grabbed my belongings and relocated immediately. Once inside the new room, I finally started feeling safe. I locked every lock. Checked the windows. Then sat on the bed replaying everything that had happened. Eventually exhaustion won. I drifted off. Sometime later I woke up again. The room was still dark. What woke me was movement outside. I saw a shadow pass the window. Then again. And again. I carefully moved toward the curtain. Peeking through the smallest opening possible, I felt my stomach twist. It was the same man. He was slowly walking back and forth in front of my room. No voices this time. No knocking. No talking. Just pacing. Every time he passed, he turned his head toward my window. Watching. Observing. Waiting. I watched him repeat the same path several times before disappearing around the corner of the building. I never fell asleep again. The moment daylight arrived, I packed my things, loaded my car, and left. I didn't even bother checking out. I stopped for coffee at the first gas station I found and realized my hands were still shaking. To this day, I don't know what that man wanted. Maybe he was mentally unstable. Maybe he was just looking to scare someone. Either way, that night permanently cured me of staying at cheap roadside motels.